Welcome everyone to the HealthyU podcast. I am your host, Dawn Funk, coming to you down here from the Panhandle of Florida. And as always, it is such a privilege and an honor to spend just a little bit of time with you to help you take ownership of your health. And that's what we're all about here, is just giving you other perspectives and just getting to hear incredible stories like you're going to hear today from our guest, Debera, who is joining us from Colorado. And I did get that right? Colorado.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And so, today is going to be such a blessing. And as I always like to remind you guys, if you're not driving, have a journal, a pen and paper handy. If you are driving, then you need to listen to this at least twice, once to take it all in and soak it up, and then to take some notes, because I know that Debera is going to be sharing some amazing things today to help you. And so our topic, and I dropped my paper. There we go, real life. Our topic today is when I found me and my health. And like I said, Debera has an incredible story that she is going to share her heart and get very real and vulnerable and just share things with you today. But before we dive in, I want to tell you a little bit more about Debera, who she is, and just some of her amazing accomplishments. And so Debera is a rapid relief and mindset and energy coach. And she gives just a different perspective on the world of alternative health, and one of her specialties as a podcast guest speaker today. And she is passionate about helping people achieve better mental attitudes through energy and mindset work, which will reflect on their physical health and assist them in living their best lives. I love that. And she's going to talk here in just a minute about her trauma that she experienced when she was 28 years old. And so what again, a blessing and a gift that she is sharing about that in order to help serve others. And she is going to talk all about her amazing website and resources that she has available. And of course, we'll include those in the show notes for you guys. But she recently also co-authored a book that became the #1 international bestseller in 3 countries in the mental health, acupuncture, and acupressure. And this is a big word, but here we go: psycho, neuroimmunology, holistic medicine, mental wellness, aromatherapy, mental health nursing, PTSD. Those are all the different things that this book addresses. And she's currently working on her second book, which is a compilation of stories of overcoming childhood trauma. So, I mean, you guys, buckle up, because this is going to be absolutely amazing today. But before we dive in, I want you guys to meet Debera Jensen, and she's just going to share her heart and connect with you guys, and then we'll dive right into the interview. So, Debera, let's just learn a little bit more about you as a person.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much. Well, I read, Dawn and I were talking before we came on today, and she was talking about how she rescues animals. And I said, Dawn, I love you even more, because I also do the same thing. I have done that for years. I'm down to 1 animal right now, and he's a little kitty, and he owns the joint. He owns me. He runs me, my husband, everybody, runs the household. So he's adorable. His name is Squeak. And that's because when I got him, he was the runt of the litter. And he, because of something that happened since he was born last, he didn't really have a voice. But of course, with what I do, I help people find their voices. So now he's got a really loud voice. Probably just being in proximity, right?
Yeah.
But he is adorable. He's just the most precious little kitty. At night, I say we kind of grew up together, because I had him when he was this big.
Aww.
And at night, he comes up on my chest and he puts his paws on either side of my neck and just purrs and purrs and purrs. And he, how I love him, how we pet our animals. Well, he does
Yes.
the same to me, which works really well, except when his claws get long.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But
Oh.
he's adorable.
So
And
cute.
so,
I hope he makes an appearance. I hope we get to see him.
oh, I wish I could, but I'm in a different place today
Oh,
for the
yeah.
internet. Otherwise, he would make an appearance, I'm sure.
Oh.
And I have always forever and ever loved music.
Mm.
So I did a lot of singing in the world, and now I guess, sort of retired. I just kind of sing for myself, but
Yeah.
I might do a little more for people again. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
Uh,
I didn't know that about you. So that's
yeah.
even more cool. So what's the neatest place that you've ever sung at before? The neatest experience that, I mean, can you think of maybe
Oh
one of
gosh.
your top five or something?
Oh my goodness. I did a lot of all kinds of singing,
Yeah.
uh, but one of the things that was always a real challenge for me was opera. So I ended up doing
Mm.
a lot of opera singing.
Wow.
And so I loved doing, like, in the larger venues,
Yeah.
in Denver, especially.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
they would have, I don't know how many hundreds or however many people were there, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it was just fun. It was exciting,
Yeah.
especially exciting before I got that first note out.
Yeah, I bet.
because because at that time I didn't know all of the tools that I know now to get through fear and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so, but once I got that first note out, then it was smooth
Yeah.
sailing from then on.
That's awesome. Well, and you said
Yeah.
something that I think is so cool, and it's you help people find their voice, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm just really excited again today, just to empower people, the audience that's listening again through your journey and your struggles and what you've overcome. So guys, just again take this all in, and I hope that you find a greater voice after today's interview. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. So how does, the first question is, how does working through a head injury, and I know you're going to share about your story here in a second,
Mhm.
but how does working through a head injury and childhood trauma, how does working through that help your health? So let's go ahead and start right there.
Okay. So as you said, Don, when I was 28 years old, I was in great health, very physically fit, having a great life. And then I was in a car accident, which changed everything in seconds. And I didn't know all the damage that had been done at first. I immediately went to the doctor, but they didn't have the mm, evaluative tools that they needed at that time, to even find out what kind of head injury that I had. And in fact, one of the first doctors that I went to gave me a mental test, and with lots of things you had to remember. And I guess I passed it with flying colors because he said, "Oh, you have no problems at all." But I knew I couldn't think right. I knew I wasn't able to just really do anything like I had done before. I couldn't read well. I couldn't speak well. Some people, I remember a lady talking to me one day, and I suddenly realized that I could not understand what she was saying at
Mm.
all.
Oh,
And some kind of divine intervention happened, because suddenly I could read lips. Now I have no idea how that can happen, but anyway, it happened. And I thought, wow, I'm going to just stay away from people because this is like way too embarrassing. Um, but I had so many problems and so much pain. So when I went to the doctors, they said, "Gosh, you're in the most pain we've ever seen, and it never stops."
mm.
So I wore a TENS unit and all kinds of other things, which rarely worked. And then all of the doctors basically said, "Your life is over as you have known it."
Oh,
And
wow.
I just said, "Oh my gosh," at 28 years old, right?
Wow.
And I just could not imagine that that could be so.
Mm.
And, but I kept going to the doctors and got, some of the best in the US that I could find, was spending all of my money.
Mm.
And finally, two of the younger doctors came to me and they said, "We really like you.
Mm.
And we have to tell you, stop spending your money in this direction,
Mm.
because we don't have the answers. Your injuries are far too severe. but we want you to find the answers. And when you find the answers, please come back and tell us, share it with us. Yours are the most severe, but there are other people that have also severe injuries. And they said, go out and seek alternative types of things. At that time, I didn't even know what an alternative was. Right. And I don't even know how I got into my first class. I've tried to reconstruct it, but probably again, some kind of divine intervention. But
Right.
I finally started taking all these classes, which I didn't understand, right? Because I had a severe head injury. But eventually I got one little thing, and then I would get another little thing, and I would just keep repeating classes and taking new classes, and started realizing that, oh, there was a little bit of hope. And so I kept on keeping on, as they say. And what I found eventually was that some of my pain was going away. And I was starting to think better, just a little bit at a time. But then eventually I realized, wow, I'm not in any pain at all. And all the doctors that I've been to and all the specialists never could get rid of the pain. Nowadays, about 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago, I went to just have a testing done of my spine. And the reaction is always the same. Oh my gosh, you are in the worst pain I've ever seen in my entire life. And I look at them because they're looking at the infrared or the whatever kind of testing they're doing. And what they see is pain, pain, pain. And what I told the last gentleman was, I'm not in any pain at all, none at all. And he said, well, how do you account for that? And I said, I think it must be mindset, because it finally just disappeared. But if you see pictures of my spine, it looks awful. It looks terrible. No one could ever correct it, but I'm not feeling any pain. So that's the power of mindset. There are all kinds of problems I should be having. I can read, I can write, I can talk, obviously, right? I have a business, and also somewhere along the way, I discovered that I really needed to address some of my other challenges, which were the childhood trauma. And once I could get through that, I live a life of joy. And any kind of trauma you could just put an equals mark and say trauma equals pain equals anxiety equals depression equals, right? So when you get rid of the trauma, when I can teach people to reduce the trauma, then they start living these most amazing, amazing lives.
Wow.
So it's exciting.
No, well, and I'm just taking notes because, you said a couple things. One, just again, and that's why I love the heart of what we do at this podcast is, I think a lot of times people think that Western medicine and doctors have all the answers. And as you've illustrated through your story, I mean, they truly couldn't help you. And even, I mean, what a gift that those doctors told you to seek alternative treatment. And, and I know I've shared my story with you guys before too, and just, how I went to all these different doctors and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And opposite to you, all of their tests were showing that I was fine, but yet I was in a lot of pain and had a lot of symptoms. And so, I love the word hope, and I love that, you had that, and, just again, that you did seek that alternative treatment. And so I'm just curious, because your story is so extraordinary. You went from all this pain to no pain, and you sought out alternative treatment, and you took ownership, and you took all these classes. In that, like, what do you think were some of the key things that you did? I don't know if it's like affirmation. I mean, I don't even know. Like, what were some of the strategies that you think that you employed that helped you to go from the pain to no pain? Like, were there any specific strategies or things or habits that you built?
Gosh, with that, I have to say, I'd like to say that I had strategies, but
Yeah.
no, I was too injured to have strategies.
Yeah.
I just had determination
Mm,
but out of desperation.
right. Well, and you had
And,
extraordinary patience. I mean, too, and just, I mean, you had.
um, I'm not sure.
Oh, really? I'm like, to be able to go through that, like you have to have, yeah,
Yeah,
patience in
yeah.
the
Well,
process.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But what I had was I knew this is kind of a terrible thing to say. I don't even believe in suicide, but
Mm,
I thought about it.
mm,
Most of the people who had any injuries like mine, actually, they either thought about it, they had it planned, or they actually had
mm.
completed their suicides. So
Wow.
it's when you're in that much unrelenting pain
Yeah.
and you've pretty much lost who you are
Mm,
because of your head injury, um, it it tests everything about you.
wow.
And there must have been a small belief that started emerging. Well,
Yeah.
I know that I just thought my life cannot be over
Mhm.
this early. I was
Yeah.
having a great life, you
Yeah.
know, and
Mm,
so I just really thought I want my life back, you
yeah.
know. And so that must have become a belief. But to answer your questions, um, nowadays when I'm working with people, I get them through, I help them teach them to get through the negative emotions. Um, and at that time after my accident, part of the negative emotions were, of course, anger,
Mm,
just really big anger, rage,
yeah.
that this fellow who was the cause of the accident was just kind of having fun one day, young guy, not paying attention. And that would, something like that,
Mm,
irresponsibility
yeah.
could destroy my life.
Mm,
So I had to get through that. One of the first people that I went to was a nutritionist, and she said, "You have to learn to forgive." And my answer was, "Are you kidding me?"
mm.
you know, but she said that has to be first before you can heal.
Mm,
So I was getting through the negative emotions, and eventually I learned that through all of my trainings that I could change my negative beliefs into positive beliefs.
mm,
And so that's what I started to do. Um, Even though I couldn't think, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that, I would create new beliefs that I
mm,
was thinking easily.
wow.
I My body was feeling great.
Mm,
And they say, I don't, you probably know this, but supposedly we have 50 to 75,000 thoughts a day,
mm,
and most of them are negative,
yeah.
right?
Wow.
So what I found is when I can change a belief, it changes probably thousands of those negative things that we normally say to ourselves. And that's really good because we don't have to keep going over the same
Mm,
thing ad nauseum,
mm,
right? Trying to get better. We just start from the beliefs and get better.
yeah. It's so good. Well, and I just had a phone call yesterday from a friend of mine who just found out that she has cancer.
Mm,
And, to your point, like you just accepted the fact that your life is not over. Like, like you're going to thrive, that
right.
you form these belief sets. And I think about the word cancer today and just all the fear and everything that's associated with it. And so we may have some listeners that maybe have had that diagnosis or have a relative, and maybe you even work with patients that, or clients that that's maybe the source of their fear. And so, I don't know, you just made me think about that, of how you can change your whole perception of even that word and that diagnosis. So I don't know if
Right.
you have any comments about that or. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have people, they come to me and they don't even say that they have any health challenges part of the time. And then we'll be halfway through what we're doing and they'll say, oh, by the way, did you know that this and this and this disappeared? And it was a pretty significant health challenge.
Wow.
So it happens all the time. And all I'm doing is teaching them some new mindset skills.
That's awesome. I love
And it's the body is so powerful. I mean, I so believe in this,
it. Yeah.
obviously from my own experience, but the fact that my body could heal
Yes.
itself and my spine, even though I wish I was trying to get a picture of it the other day, but it looks horrible. If you
Wow.
saw it, it almost is nauseating.
Mm.
But I shouldn't be able to be walking and, doing all that I do. I exercise, I do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I don't look like I've ever been injured.
Wow.
And I don't feel it.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. So the body, the wisdom of the body is amazing.
Mm.
And even in the processes that I do with people, we go in and we ask their bodies questions because their
Mm.
bodies have that internal wisdom.
Yeah. That's so good. Oh, I love this. So you touched on, obviously you shared about your accident when you were 28 years old.
Mhm.
You've also touched on this childhood trauma.
Right.
So do you mind just kind of elaborating a little bit more on that and how that's been a part of your journey as well and with your healing?
No, not at all. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was the type of person that went to the libraries and I read every single book there was on the
Mhm.
shelf, self-help book.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't realize how bad my childhood trauma was at first. You kind of, I don't know, you set it on the back burner or something and you think, oh, well, it couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah.
Um, but for whatever reason, I think my mother was depressed or something, something was going on. And she, let's say it would be called neglect.
Mm.
So I was the unwanted child.
Mm.
And so I always felt like I didn't have value
Mm.
or that anyone wanted to listen to me or see me or, I just kind of disappear
Mm.
and not really show up in relationships and in the world, the business world. um I didn't think that I really had a voice. Speaking of a voice, right?
Yeah.
And so even in school, in grade school, I remember getting the counselors called my parents in because they thought something was really wrong with me because I wouldn't speak.
Mm.
And I learned early on it didn't pay to speak because nobody listened anyway,
Mm.
except my father. But fortunately, I had him, but he traveled a lot, so he wasn't home a lot.
Mm.
Um, so that was a very, very daunting childhood. But some of the other things that happened, one of the things was abandonment. My my best friend was my oldest sister,
Mm.
and she was 11 years older. So she actually took care of me because my mother mostly didn't,
Mm.
at least for a little while.
Yeah.
And so my older sister was kind of my mother, my substitute mother.
Yeah.
And then she got married when I was 8 years old. And
Oh,
there's nothing wrong with that, right?
yeah.
But
Right.
she moved to a different state
Mm.
and I was just crushed. So now I had abandonment issues on
Yeah.
top of everything else. And my question was, well, why would you leave me with our mother?
Yeah.
Um, but people have different reasons for having childhood challenges. They might be with a narcissistic parent,
Yeah.
or they may be actually bullied by
Mm.
someone. It could be something at school. It could be something like a sibling
Mm.
that they're having problems with,
Mhm.
um, or any number of things, including I had a fellow that I did some training with, and he had grown up as a poor man, very poor man. And that had affected him way into his adulthood. So he was coaching. He's actually really well known now,
Mm.
but he would, if he didn't have interest in some of his conferences that he was giving, he would actually cry. He would start crying because what was running in his mind was, oh, wow, well, I will always be poor. Nothing will ever work for me and that sort of thing.
Mm.
So, there's also actually physical abuse, but also psychological abuse and a number of other things. But there's also a little child that was brought to me one time, and her parents, all they had done was they had moved from one city to another. But it also depends on your perspective, because the child just fell apart. She started acting out and getting bad grades in school, right? And they brought her to me because they didn't know what was wrong. And so if a person is vulnerable and they take something, they have a certain perspective about something that it's really bad, even if it isn't, then that also can affect them dramatically. So again, there are all kinds of childhood trauma, and sometimes we think it has to be something really, really awful that happens,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always have to be something that on the surface looks awful.
Yeah.
There's a lady that came to me and she had something like, most people would call it probably social anxiety or something. She didn't really have any friends to speak of. Well, maybe a couple. She had a hard time having a conversation with people. And as I was talking to her, I realized I would talk and then there would be this long hesitation before she would answer. And I finally asked her about it. And she said, well, I'm figuring out what I have to say. And I said, really? Well, what had happened was she had gone on a trip with her parents. They were probably really well-meaning and everything, but she was a small child. They didn't know what to do with her.
Yeah.
Probably didn't have enough games or something. We've tried to surmise what happened.
Right.
And they didn't talk to her very much. So guess what? She came to the belief that that she wasn't interesting.
Oh gosh.
So that became a pattern throughout the rest of her life until we worked together. And she would get with people and she'd get really nervous
Oh.
and, short of breath and everything. And she just didn't know what to say in order to be interesting. And once we could change that around to a whole different belief that she was just interesting and, exciting to be with and everything, well, guess what? She went into her situations, her social situations, with much confidence. She had a great time. She got a lot more friends. She was starting a business when we first got together. And again, she could hardly talk. Maybe, I don't know, a few months later, she did one webinar. The second webinar, she's talking all over the world.
Wow.
And enjoying it.
Wow.
So it's like breaking up those patterns, because we grow up with those patterns from childhood, and because of whatever's happened to us, we think that has to repeat, and it doesn't.
Right. Well, and just to your point, like a lot of these things are lies, right? I mean, they're not true things. And unfortunately, we get sucked into believing those lies. And so, gosh, that's so good. That story is so inspiring. And, to your point, I mean, I think a lot of people, struggle with different, things. And it's interesting you talk about childhood drama and you say it in a way that it doesn't have to be like this significant, horrible thing that's happened to you. It could be something that's super simple. But again, if you just continue to replay that and believe that, how that can really impact your future or your current situation. And I just really appreciate you walking us through that whole journey with that woman, and just to see how she went from hardly being able to just off the cuff have a conversation like that,
Oh,
something
yeah.
that you and I just take for granted is just, I can talk to anybody, right? And that's
Oh,
just
yeah.
it becomes very comfortable to me. But yet, I have other issues, but but again, it's like
We all
I
do. So.
never, I know, but it's like I never, that there are people like that, that they truly struggle to even just have a conversation. So the work that you
Yes.
do, oh gosh, the work you're doing just really matters. I just love it.
Thank you.
So moving into our next question, what have people noticed after they have been taught to leave their head injuries and their childhood traumas behind? So I know you've already shared some great examples, but so once people have that breakthrough, what are some things that they start to notice as a result of putting those things and leaving them in the past?
Right. It depends on what their past trauma was, of course, but they end up getting to be themselves, be authentic. Like the lady I just described, she is so happy in life right now. She is just enjoying herself thoroughly, comfortable in conversations, comfortable in business. Um, they get to be seen and heard and have a voice. They get to be themselves, really themselves. And that's what all of us, I think, are striving for. I know that's what I was striving for. And once that happens, it's amazing how much easier life gets.
Yes.
Can I read you a testimonial from
Oh, for sure. Yes.
This lady had childhood trauma, and she was basically told that, she couldn't do a lot of things right, and she didn't look right, and she didn't this right, and she would never be able to be happily married and all of that sort of thing. So for whatever reason, I don't know why those things were told to her, but she didn't ever feel like she had a voice. And if anything happened that was a little bit difficult in life, she couldn't really speak up for herself. And as much as she tried, she would just kind of freeze, right? And if there was a party or something, she would actually go hide in another room for part of the party because she was so nervous socially. Now she has none of those problems. She has a great relationship, by the way. And this is what she said: I am very happy where I landed in myself. Life is not sanitized, but now I can live fully. Nowadays, I am thinking, oh, so this is how it feels to be at the party. Be my full self all the time. My agency is there.
That's awesome. Wow.
And again, she's having a wonderful life.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy because you just made me think of just even something from my past. So when I was in middle school, we moved, and it was pretty traumatic, just being at such a impactful age. And so we got into a new school system, and my sister and I, we were teased a lot. They, like the kids on the bus, like we were breastless and chestless and the stick sisters and all these things. And I just remember in high school, like specifically, that I had to give a speech one time, and I was so nervous, like to get up in front of the class. I mean, I know a lot of people struggle with speaking in front of others and public speaking, and it was awful. And I don't remember every single detail. I just remember it was horribly embarrassing. And, just I just had this like high school experience where I wasn't one of the cool girls. I felt like a total dork a lot of the time. And so because of that specific speech moment, when in my opinion I must have failed and did horrible, right, that I was this horrible public speaker. And so fast forward to, I wanted to become a teacher, and that crept up, and I can't tell you how nervous and scared. The worst classes I took to become a teacher were those when I had to get up in front of people. And it was horrible. I mean, anxiety for days and days, like my stomach would be in knots. I would be so stressed about having to get up in front of the room. And I remember my hope was, I just got to get through this because then it'll just be kids and it won't matter. I won't be as nervous in front of kids. So anyway, so fast forward, I suck it up and, go through the experience. Well, then I end up later in life becoming a college professor. And it's like, oh my gosh, I have to speak. And yet I had been a classroom teacher for years.
Right.
Yet this horrible anxiety about I have to speak in front of adults. And so then that happened and I, you know, did it and sucked it up and faced my fear. So I added a little more confidence. And then fast forward to I walked into a whole new career path.
Yes.
And it was about probably 7 years ago, maybe six, that I had to get up in front of 25,000 people in
Mm.
Dallas Cowboys Stadium and train and teach and share my heart. And I literally held on to my husband's hand. I couldn't let go of his hand. And it was the most grueling, like I was snot bubble crying beforehand because I was so scared.
Oh, bless your heart.
And but to your point, like I was authentic. Like I just shared my heart. And so then fast forward, since then
I congratulate you, by
yeah.
the way.
Well, but since I've trained on stages by myself. Like I remember like the first time without my husband and so I guess my point is like all of this goes back to that moving in middle school. And I
Right,
get it. Parents have to
right,
move. I mean, we
right.
just had my daughter move into a new high school. But it's interesting, just I never really thought about that, how so many times in my life that has shown up. And,
Right.
and it's that decision of either I'm going to cower in fear and not do it,
Mhm.
or I'm going to suck it up and, you know, grow through it and add a little more confidence because of it. So,
You gave a perfect example because imagine a world where, let's say, someone had helped you get through that original trauma.
mhm.
And then the next time you went on to the next level, you had no anxiety,
Yeah, I know.
no problems with it.
Oh,
You just got up and did it
oh,
without going through all of that.
yeah,
And then you went through to the next level and you got there easily
yeah,
without going through all the trauma and anxiety again.
yeah.
And then you got to the next level without
Oh,
all of that angst.
that would have been amazing. As I think back to like the lost sleep, and the stomach aches and the sweaty armpits
Right,
in my
right.
clothes because I was sweating out through them. And
Yeah. Well,
gosh, that's good.
that's the kind of world
Yeah.
I'm doing my best to create.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, because I mean, truly, the work and the counseling and the support that you give, like you said, you can minimize all of this anguish. So that
Yeah.
was amazing
Right.
that someone like you. All right, so moving on to just the next question is, how has releasing the injuries and the childhood trauma, how has that helped your business? So let's kind of move into that
Oh
segment.
my gosh. Um, I cannot even tell people how amazing it is when they get through the trauma and everything, how amazing business can be. Um, you don't even know how much easier it can be until the trauma leaves.
Mm,
I actually realized this quite by accident because I was working with a lot of business owners. And as
mhm,
we were getting through the trauma, they kept saying to me things like, well, my business just doubled. And I thought, well, that's interesting.
mhm.
And then the next person would come in and they got through trauma and they would say, my business just doubled. And they didn't know what was happening. Neither did I, but it kept happening. Right. And I
Yeah,
thought, wow, we're onto something here.
yeah,
But yeah, everything gets so much easier um, and better.
mm,
And it's wonderful.
yeah. Well, and I think too, and I'm assuming this is true, but I don't want to make assumptions, so I want to hear your input. But like, if we have this, because I feel like this is something that I'm even going through, right? So I had breast implant illness a couple years ago, and my body was like in this fight or flight mode, right?
Right.
Because of
Uh-huh.
just the toxicity or whatever.
Sure.
And so, I feel like if people hold on to this trauma, it's like our body, like our body just can't handle the stress of it. Like it it affects our health, I guess is my point. And
Yep.
I'm seeing it myself. Like I've seen how holding on to this trauma with the breast implant illness and whatever, like I've seen it to where it's it's a challenge to kind of get back to that calmer state, if that makes sense. So maybe just touch on that, on how holding on to this trauma can impact your physical health.
Right. I think that, um, again, our bodies and our brains are so wise, incredibly so. And I've seen it over and over and over. I'm so fortunate because I get to see this not only in my own life, but other people's lives. And they have so much capacity to heal. Our bodies are just exceptional healers. But I feel like they have all this energy, and the energy is all being absorbed on all of these fears and anxieties and trauma and everything that we think we have to work on, which is, I get it. We don't want to live in fear and anxiety, but there's another way to get through those things. And then when we let go of those things, what I see is the body just heals. It is a healing machine. Again, I wouldn't say that, but I am so convinced. I'm getting like shivers up and down my spine as I say that, because I know it from firsthand experience. I am not supposed to be able to be walking, talking, having no pain. I'm not supposed to have overcome all of these things. Neither are my people that I've been, helping teach these things. So again, once the body has the energy available for healing, because it's not, that energy isn't going down the tubes to anxiety or whatever, then it applies its own energy to itself and to its healing. I am convinced of that, because I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing when I'm working with people and myself is I'm just removing the negatives and putting in the positives.
It's so good. And I'm looking at your website right now because I went to your site, and I mean, I love what you have here at the very beginning. And again, I think so many of our listeners can relate to this. Are you tired of being tired? And that's something that,
Yeah.
I even say that in my business, like I was sick and tired of being tired all the time. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There are different types of trauma. Each person has their own individual reaction. But if you're experiencing any of the following, a sense of laziness, a lack of productivity, or an inability to be productive, just general malaise, numbness, or desire to numb with alcohol, drugs, interrupted sleep, or the inability to fall asleep. I mean, in my wellness business, I deal with so many people that struggle with that, or just general fatigue
Sure.
for no reasons, flashbacks or other forms to reliving, replaying events over and
Right.
over.
Right.
That's the hypervigilance,
Mhm.
irritability. I mean, gosh, it goes on and on. But you say, well, and shame. I know a lot of people that struggle with that. Altered thoughts, fear, anger, depression, anxiety. Then you might be suffering from trauma.
Right.
And I just think this is so good and such an important thing to help people realize, because again, I think there are a lot of people that suffer from these things and they get sucked into Western medicine and going to all these doctors that want to prescribe, and I'm not anti-medication, but they prescribe medicines to numb the pain or whatever without getting to the root cause. Do you know what I mean? And I feel
Oh
like
yeah. Sure
that's
do.
what you do. You help people get to this root cause. So I love that. Okay, so last question is just, and I know I've touched on this in your introduction, but are you working on any new projects, related to your work? And if you have a copy of your first book, I think you
I
showed it
do.
to me today. Yeah, show that to everybody. Tell
I
us a little bit about this book and then the one that you're working on right now.
This is PTSD Compass, and this is the one that you were mentioning early on. That actually, a lady just asked me if I would be willing to help some people. I
Oh,
had no
nice.
idea who she was. I don't know how she found me. I've got to find out. I never did
Wow.
find out. But she said, you work with trauma. Would you be willing to write a little bit of something to help people? And I said, sure. I didn't have time to write a lot, so I didn't. But I wrote a little bit, having had no idea it was going to, top the charts like it did.
Wow.
But right now I am on a mission, a new mission.
I love that. I say that all the time. I am on a
Oh,
mission.
good.
I love that.
I
That's
knew
good.
I loved you.
Yes, I love that.
I really do like you. Yeah, I like
I
your
like
passion.
you too.
Thank you.
Oh,
But I have this passion, and it's even greater in the world today than it ever has been, because I see so many people in so much trauma these days. And, we can say it's from the state of the world or whatever, but it's not just that. People are having things that I call stack attacks. I don't know if you ever heard of it before,
no, but I love that, the way you worded that.
yeah, something happens in the world today that
Yes.
maybe causes fear,
Mm,
but they're experiencing not just the fear of the event that's happening today, but there's enough of something in that event that reminds them of a past trauma. And then not only are they experiencing the event of today, but they're experiencing the whole past trauma, not at a conscious level, but a subconscious level. And guess what? They just go off the charts with anxiety and depression. And we're seeing a lot more, suicides in the world
yeah.
these days. And I never have seen people in such bad shape in my life. Until I can get rid of the past trauma so that they're only experiencing what they're experiencing today in terms of world events. And what I've seen happen is the people who don't get rid of the past trauma, again, they are really having a rough time. The people that are getting rid of the past traumas and they are just experiencing today's events are having rich, joyful lives. Of course, they know that there are things happening in the world. They're very proactive. They're doing whatever they're doing, but they're okay. They're more than okay. And so I've got this new book that I'm working on, and it is When I Found Me. And it's about coming out of trauma, because you really get to be yourself, as we talked about before. And so that's the book. And I'm looking for other co-authors who would like to write a chapter about how they overcame trauma, so we can help people in the world. I am wanting to get it out to at least 100,000 people, women and men, anybody who might be
Gosh,
interested.
I already know some people. I'm like,
Yes.
hey, I'm
Okay.
like, I could totally recommend a few people for sure.
Good. Great.
Oh, that's so awesome. Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, and you guys, you've got to check out her website, and like, again, it'll be in the show notes and you can touch on that too. But she has a free downloadable guide. And I have to say, I am a huge bird lover. I absolutely love cardinals and hummingbirds. So like, I'm weird about things like that, but I'm like, oh, and it has a hummingbird. That is a hummingbird?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
definitely.
beautiful. But she has an action guide. I love that. The word action guide to healing from childhood trauma. So, go to her website. It's at thetraumahealingcoach.com.
That's correct.
Again, thetraumahealingcoach.com, and download this. And again, as she said multiple times, this does not have to be this huge event that happened in your childhood. As I shared about mine, just something like speaking in front of my classmates has been something that has haunted me for my entire adult life, until I finally kind of broke free from that a few years ago. And so be sure to check that out. And then also, Deborah, will you share a little bit more about that, so people can actually book a free consultation with you, correct? Right on your
Yes,
website?
that's correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what that entails.
Yes, if they go to www.talkwithdebera.com, and Deborah is spelled Debera, they can come right into my schedule and I will give them a free session. And we
Oh,
can talk about whatever they want to talk about, whatever their challenges are, and how I might be able to give them some little tips that will be helpful and
okay.
kind of guide them a little bit as to how they can have their best lives.
Yes, I love that. Well, and yeah, in my wellness business, that's what our motto is: do life better, like living your best life.
I love it. Yes, I
I
love
love
it.
that too. I know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
okay, so I just, again, because I'm sure people listening are like, okay, I could benefit from working with Deborah. So, I know this has to vary depending on people, but when someone works with you, what does that kind of look like? Is that a weekly commitment? Like, what have you found? Give us some examples of kind of like how
It-
long of a process that can be. And again, I'm sure it has
Right,
to vary, but
right. It just depends on, of course, what's happening. But usually people come in weekly, except
okay.
quite a few people realize you can feel the changes very quickly. You might
Okay.
not be through everything at
Yeah.
first, but you can really feel a lot better quickly. So
Okay.
a lot of times, what seems to be happening a lot lately is people are coming in with more frequency because
Yeah.
they say, wow, this is working. So I'm just going to come
Yeah.
in even more. So they might be
Right.
coming, twice a week or
Yeah.
3 times a week. That's not necessary, by the way.
Right.
Usually it's once a week. And again, it just depends. It could be like a couple of months to more, but this is not talk therapy or anything like that.
Okay.
Nothing against talk therapy, but this
Right.
is really, I think it's some of the fastest work in the world that I know about.
Yeah.
And so again, people are changing, but they're changing from the root cause
Yes.
forward into their lives. And in that way, they're manifesting something totally new in a lot of ways that they've always wanted, a way to live their lives fully and authentically.
Yes. I love that. And so, and you do meet with people virtually, of course, too, right? Or
Yes.
okay. Is
Yeah.
that exclusively how you do your work, or do you do?
Right now, yes.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well,
Yeah. And I
awesome.
saw this little bumper sticker a while back. I have to tell you
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
It was so cute, but it kind of says it. It said, it's never too late to have a great childhood.
Yeah, that's so good. That's perfect. I love that. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
very cool. Well, this has been so enjoyable and so meaningful. And I can't wait to share this episode with so many friends and
Oh,
people
thank
that
you.
need this. And gosh,
Well,
what a blessing you are. I love your energy and just your aura and your presence.
thank you.
It just oozes positivity, and
Oh,
I can see why you've helped a lot of people have success and find that joy and have that healing. So
thank
thank you. I
you.
always love to give the guests just kind of like the final thoughts or words or anything that you have on your heart, just to kind of leave the listeners with today. So please go ahead and share anything
Okay.
else you'd like to add.
Yeah. So I would just say, again, I am passionate about helping the world in the way that I can help the world be a better world.
Yeah.
And so I'm really getting to as many people as I possibly can, because if I could ever fully describe how much happier people's lives are
Mm.
after doing this work, I would be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Uh-huh.
Because it is, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back or
Right.
anything.
Right. No, I know.
I just really feel this from the bottom of my soul.
Mm.
And, it's something that probably everyone
Mhm.
could get value from and everyone can feel better from. And then we don't have to have so much negativity in the world. We
Yes.
can have happy, fulfilled,
Mm.
wonderful lives
Mm.
and start seeing that in each other and, create a large change in the world.
Yes, I love that. It's so good. Well, your work matters and it's important. And thank you again for just giving up time today, just to be on this show and just pour your heart and add value to so many people that I hope will take advantage of this episode. So thank you again. And,
Thank you,
you
Don.
know, you're so welcome. And thank you
It's a
to
pleasure.
thank you to everyone who's listening. And, as I always like to remind you guys, as you've been listening to this interview today with Debera, I'm sure that there have been people put on your heart that you're like, oh, they need to hear this. And so please be that servant hearted person and share this episode with them. You could absolutely change someone's life. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening today. And thank you again to Debera for being on the show. And have a blessed rest of the day or night. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you guys. So
Thanks so much.
yeah, thank
To
you.
you and all of your listeners.